want me to get me see me pressing up?
Yeah.
Okay.
We're ready.
Good morning.
Good
Today is
morning.
April 22nd, 2020. It's Earth Day. Because of our commitment to care for the earth, today's a big day for Sisters of Divine Providence of San Antonio. We're going to speak this morning with Sister Frances Lorene, who has a deep commitment to the environment. Sister Frances Lorene, among those of us who know you, your name is synonymous with earth care. Could you share with us the origin of this commitment? What motivates you?
You really want that. I was born into a family of Anton Lange and Frances Lange. And out on a farm, we lived on a farm, we tended a farm, we were part of the earth. And as a child, we just did all the things in the field and took care of the animals and whatever needed to be tended to. I never would have thought of a term like earth care. It was just our life. And my dad would teach us many things, and I can't tell you many of those stories, but I'll tell you one which I go back to now frequently. It was time to harvest potatoes, and he said, "Oh, do you want to go down to the garden with me?" The others were occupied with something else on the farm. So I said, sure. We went, and my dad dug the potato bush out, and he laid it on its side, and he said, now your job is to pick all the potatoes off the roots. So I happily picked all the little potatoes off the root of that potato bush, and I thought, oh, I'll just do an extra little piece of work here. So I took it to the garden fence, and I tossed it across the fence, because I knew often garden things, we tossed them across the fence for the animals. So I felt really proud of myself. When I came back, my dad said, you know what, if you go back and get that, I want to show you something else. So I went to get my tomato bush that I had tossed, and the hole that was there from digging the potato bush out, he just made it a little bit bigger with his hands, and then he took the tomato bush and he sort of folded it several times over, put it in the hole, covered it up, and looked at me and said, if we feed the earth, if we're good to the earth, it's going to be good to us, and we're going to have a harvest again next year. Well, that really, really impressed me. And I don't know if that's really the beginning of connecting the two, but it's a story that I go back to when somebody says, why do you care for the earth?
Yeah. That's a great story. Thank you for that.
Yeah, I can tell you a little bit more sort of on another side of it. My mother she was very religious, both parents were. But when anything happened that was a mishap, like a storm came through, the hail took the crops, or there wasn't enough rain, and my dad would say, oh, and he'd sort of bemoaning and regretting it, and my mother would say, Tony, but there is God. In German, aber da ist der liebe Gott, but God will never abandon us. And it was that faith, knowing that God is out there on the farm with us, and then my dad's actions. I think that's what I would date to as the beginning of my commitment. And then, of course, the words, I learned the words that we're using now. At that chapter a long time ago, 1972, when the first time the chapter delegates talked about care of the earth, and and I think we used those terms, something like that. And I thought, oh, it has something to do with CDP life. And then from there on, of course, we had our chapter statement, chapter after chapter. We renewed that statement, or some different articulation thereof.
It sounds like your parents taught you about providence very effectively, didn't they?
Oh yes, they were my first teachers about charism, absolutely, especially my mother. Yeah.
Sister, you spent several years as a missionary in Ghana. Did that experience contribute in a significant way to your devotion to earth care?
Yes, in a very different kind of way, sort of from the other side of it. The poverty and actually destitution and the reliance. The people there, they had to rely on the earth for feeding. And they worked hard in their little patches, that they called them farms, their little farm. But maybe it was just a little plot staked out in the woods or on the side of the road. But they so seriously worked on growing their vegetables, especially the root vegetables like the cassava and the yam, the Incan turmeric. Well, I guess those words don't mean anything here, but they're in me. And that gave me such an appreciation, like no food, no eat. You know, here in America, we can forget that because you just go to the store and buy it and forget where does it come from and who worked for it. Anyway, that's part of what I carry with me. And the other part that I carry with me is during the dry season, it was not an unusual thing for a family to ration out their food and eat only one meal a day because that's all there was. And like maybe a little story I want to tell you about that too. It just comes to my mind. One day I was coming home from school, teaching one of my classes, and I had a break before my next class. So I came down to the house for a few minutes, and here was the watchman for the pipe. In English, what do we call that? The well, the water well. And so he said, "Oh, sister, come with me. I want to show you something." So I did. And he opened the garage door, and from the corner of the garage, he picked up this little bird. And I wonder what this is all about. So I just listened and looked. And then he said, "May I take this to my home to my wife? Tonight we will have a good stew with meat in it." 7 in that family, one little bird. And he was so happy because that night they were going to have a rich stew that had meat in it. I mean, it sort of gets to you, it sort of wakes us up on the plenty we have and our lack of appreciation. We take it for granted. It's a lesson for us
Absolutely.
to be more aware of the goodness that we have and the nourishment we have.
One of many stories the people of Ghana taught you, I'm sure.
Oh, yes.
In fact, Sister, this is a special day for all us Sisters of Divine Providence. Are there some activities planned for today?
Well, I guess they're an all-day activity in a certain kind of way. The halls are all lit up and full of displays and excitement, and lots of conversations, and things lying around that people can pick up and read or look at, or even like a puzzle to follow or to draw. The main community activity is going to be at 4:15 when we gather in chapel and in our various places of worship, given the coronavirus. And we're going to have a prayer service, a communion service. And there's going to be a little group that walks in with a procession, and they'll be dressed like the 4 seasons. And they will carry in the basic elements of earth. And that'll be placed by the altar. So that'll be a specialty. I'm doing a reflection that sort of highlights the creation. Where does all this come from? God's act of creation. I'll do a little bit on that, and then like a reflection of a centering prayer. And of course the altar's decorated, and we're all excited what we were going to do. And I can dream about what was going to be and is happening now by website or in small groups or I don't know, everywhere. The energy's a lot this year. It's been building. But we were going to collaborate with the university and have an all-morning input educational type program. And then at noon, lunch in the mall that hopefully would have some foods there that are intentionally calling to mind for us where food comes from. And then we were going to have a planting of a tree ceremony and a blessing of the tree, and then process publicly. That would be our public part of it, our demonstration part. Back down to the convent, and then eventually into the chapel, and then have a mass together that would have like the offertory and the decorations and the prayer of the faithful, all centering around Earth Care. But it didn't happen. It couldn't happen because of the virus, but Dr. Rosenthal and I have been in email communication, and when I got some good suggestions, like things to do on the website, I'd email it to him and vice versa. So I don't know what the university is doing today, but I know they're not at school.
Right. And you want to save those plans for next year, huh?
I don't know. I don't know what his intentions are, but surely there'll be something next year.
Yes, I'm sure there will.
Yes.
Just finally, what challenge would you give to anyone viewing this video to more effectively care for the earth? What would you invite us to?
For me, the starting point, if I'm going to encourage myself or those around me, to me the starting point is God and the act of creation. I mean, if this beautiful, abundant, thriving earth was created by God, or if you're going to go scientifically, the Big Bang started it.
Mm-hmm.
But there was a moment in time, like 15 billion years ago, God set that in motion, and somehow he must have had in mind that we would come along. The astounding thing to me is that, and we know the Adam and Eve story, I'm not going to tell that, but that symbolically in what by evolution, so I have no idea about timing, but there was a time when human beings was introduced onto Earth, and God handed all of it over to us for our stewardship, for our care, and for our use, and for our enjoyment. And if we get in touch with that, how could we not care? You know, like the preciousness of that and God's trust in us. And so we have not lived up to that trust very well. We've done a good job of destroying much of the earth, and we've lost sight of where it comes from and how good and wonderful it was all created to be holy. And even God's, talking symbolically, even God sat back and said, looked at it and said, oh, this is good. This is very good. If we believe that, then we want to help keep it good or make it good. It's ailing now. We can help heal the earth. That's I think what's sort of bottom line inside of me. And that comes from my parents. I mean, it just does. That's how they believe. They didn't use those words, obviously. And they spoke German, so for sure they didn't use the language we use now, but that's what it was all about.
Thank you, Sister Frances Lorene, for your inspiring words and for the example of your life and your faith. Thank you.
I feel privileged.
Happy Earth Day.
To live long enough that I could be part of the energy. I mean, don't you feel the energy in the air?
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah.